All right, so today we are in part 5 of Peace in a World Not His. Peace in a World Not His. And we've been talking about from John 14, when Yeshua said, "My peace I give to you. My peace I leave with you." He says, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. I do not give to you as the world gives." This is from John 14:27. "Do not let your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid." So we've been talking about that because after all, we are in a world that is not his. That doesn't mean it's not his in the ultimate sense of it. In other words, he's taken his hands off of it. He's allowed it to be not his world right now. He is working with some of us in the world, but we're not to be of the world. And we read that also in John, as we were reading through John chapters 14 through 17 at the beginning of this teaching. And last week we started dealing specifically with worry. We're dealing with the idea of worry. Because after all, being in the world and not of the world has lots of things that could potentially cause you to worry. And worry steals your peace, and this is all about peace. The news media, you want to stop worrying? Stop watching the news. That'll eliminate a whole bunch of worry. Also, stop watching all the alternate news. Those guys may make you more worried than the regular news. I'm not saying they're wrong. I mean, some of them are actually giving you the truth where the other group might not be, but it's going to cause you to worry. Just remember, knowing about what's really happening isn't going to change anything necessarily, because you still need to walk this out. And if you walk this out, you'll get to where you need to be. So I'm not telling you not to watch news. I'm just telling you that if it's disturbing your peace, and a lot of you can watch the news and be fine. Some of you, it really disturbs your peace. Well, then maybe you need to watch less news. So let's deal with worry today. We're continuing, because to be worried is to have something to cause you to be anxious or uneasy because you're concerned about the potential of something dangerous happening, or you're concerned about something uncertain. There's a perceived threat of some sort or some sort of undesired consequence. And the world will give you this as a regular part of your worldly diet. As we are here in the world, that's what you're going to get a regular flow of. Let's look at Matthew chapter 13. Now, bear in mind, as Peter said in 2 Peter, I feel that although I'm going to share with you things that you already know, Peter says, I feel that it's my duty as long as I'm still alive in this fleshly tent that I stir these things to remembrance, as a reminder, because you need to know them, even though you already know them. And so, yes, we're going to cover some things that you've heard many, many times. But the question is, are you applying it? That's really what it comes down to. Matthew 13 and in verse 18, "You then hear the parable of the sower." Anybody heard that before? Hundreds of times. Well, let's focus on the worry part. "When anyone hears the word of the reign of the kingdom and does not understand it, then the wicked one comes and snatches away what was sown in his heart. This is that sown by the wayside." Now, let's start off with problem 1. You're hearing the word and you don't understand it. Now, I know you're going to be completely, at this point, realizing that I'm doing this ad nauseum. I'm nauseating you because I'm going to talk about, you ready? Structure. And Ephesians chapter 4, and the fact that they're supposed to be teachers because you're going to need them. Why would a person hear the word and not understand it? Everybody hears the word and doesn't understand it to some degree. That's not the problem. The problem that happens here is that then the wicked one comes. So it's not just because you heard it and understand it, the wicked one's going to come. It has to do with what do you do once you realize you don't understand it. Are you seeking to find yourself a teacher? The fivefold ministry, guys, that Paul says you will need until the time of the body coming into the fullness of the completeness of Yeshua himself. The unity. We're not there. You still need these guys. So when anyone hears the word of the kingdom and doesn't understand it, and doesn't then seek to find the answers to understand it, let's just insert that. I'm taking license there. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Then the wicked one will come and snatch away what was sown in his heart. This is that sown by the wayside. And that sown on rocky places, this is he who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy. So they're excited. They receive it with joy. Yet he has no root in himself, but is short-lived. When pressure or persecution arises because of the word, immediately he stumbles. All right, so the first one didn't understand it. The second one, it seems like they have an understanding and they're excited about it, but because it doesn't have the time and the patience to allow it to take root, then the pressures that come and the persecution that comes will cause the person to stumble. What does this normally look like? You get excited, your bubble was burst, Yahweh disturbed your peace, you started seeking and asking and knocking, and you found something. You found Shabbat. You found out Christmas and Easter were not the correct feasts, and there were other feasts. And you found out that you found out a bunch of great, and you were excited. And what did you do? You shared it with your friends and family members, expecting them to be excited. And then they gave you pressure and persecution. What's wrong with you? Don't you know? Blah, blah, blah. You're going to lose your salvation and blah. Didn't all of you hear all that? And that could cause some to stumble. That's why I tell everybody, get excited about this. The joy part's not the problem. Just keep it to yourself until the roots grow. You don't need to go blabber this to everybody just because you're excited about it. That's not a secret. It's just for your own protection. Understand that you could receive enough pressure and persecution that you'll stumble. It takes a while for roots to grow. The people that are newest are the people at the highest risk because they don't have time for the roots to grow. By the way, another sort of addendum to this is, and I've told this to people, and sometimes they listen, sometimes they don't. I don't know your capacity, so if you have the capacity, ignore what I'm going to say. But not everybody has the capacity to fire hose this stuff down their throat and just put it in an IV and download all of it all at once, okay? A lot of you need to hear it, process it, meditate on it, start applying it, and then get another piece, hear it, digest it, process it, start applying it, and then get another piece. You understand what I'm saying? But some of you will binge watch 47 videos in a row because you just can't get enough of it. Well, I'm telling you, some people that try to do that who are not, and it's not a negative on you, just they don't have the capacity to process that much that quickly, they will stumble. It's too much of an overload to ask the body, the mind, and the heart to change that much all at once. So I would rather you listen to something more than once, more than 3 or 4 times until you understand that one teaching. You get it, you understand it, right? The first issue is not that they didn't understand it, so you should understand it. Remember, we talk about not the 4 levels of understanding, but my 4 levels of why I do the teachings. Number 1, that you understand it. Number 2, so that you can do it. So you should listen to every teaching so at least you can do phase 1, phase 2 before you move on to anything else. There's no reason to, but I need more, and that's that Gnostic, I got to know everything. Well, why don't you just understand it first so that you can do it and then go to the next one? Patience. Pray. We need in the body, we need a little bit of patience. Of course, step 3 is that you can now defend what you understand and that you're doing, which means that you understand the typical approaches that people might have to try to knock what you're doing, to attack or persecute you and tell you how wrong you are. And of course, the last level is that you're able to teach it. All right, so you understand it, so you can do it, so you can defend it, so you can teach it. I would recommend that you listen to a teaching until you keep listening to it, until you understand it. And if you don't understand, then what do? You call the teacher. You email well, don't email the teacher, that never worked. Call the teacher. Or email the administrators of the teacher and ask for a phone call. Because I can't explain what you need in an email, even if I was getting the emails. And you all already know, a lot of you, that I get too many for me to actually keep track of everybody and respond. But I want to answer your questions if I can get a chance to do it. If you email, media at MTOI and Manny gets it, Manny will ask me the question and he can respond to you. Okay, or he'll have me answer it and I'll respond to you. But at least that way we get it done. But first you need to listen to the teaching enough times to have made the effort to understand it so you can do it. All right? And then, if you do that, you're giving the roots a chance to grow. And then the persecution and pressure won't be a problem. Because he said you're going to have persecution and pressure. No matter how you approach this, you're going to have persecution and pressure. But at least if you have the roots, you're not going to stumble. Okay? He says, and that sown among the thorns is he who hears the word, and the worry of this age and the deceit of riches choke the word, and it becomes fruitless. So you've got thorns and stuff, the vines and thorns, because it's not just thorns. The thorns don't choke anything, but the thorns are on vines. When you picture that, and it's the vines that wrap around and choke things out. And they also cut you at the same time because of the thorns. So what is the deal with the idea of the thorns? What's causing the problem with the thorns and things being choked out? Well, if you've already have an abundance of worry or things that you are chasing in the world, it doesn't leave room for the word to come in and to take root. In other words, you haven't cleaned out enough space. So don't just always think about how, I had the word and then worry came in and did. Well, but these are things that you already had a propensity to be worrying about. These are things that you tended to worry about. And also the deceit of riches. In other words, the conflict of leaving room for what Yah wants because you're too busy going after what you want. So it's not just deceit of riches like, I want to be rich and I want to be wealthy. Well, no, it's the I want. I want is the idea. What you think is going to make you happy. Let's just change that from riches to the deceit of that you're going to seek after happiness your way. True happiness is going to come from him, from his ways. So if you have already in your system an abundance of things that you worry about and things that you want and desire that you're actively pursuing with all of your effort, where is the space for the word to be sown? It's going to be choked out and you can't bear fruit. It's like having grass that's full of weeds. If you don't do anything about the weeds eventually will choke out the grass. And then the grass can't grow and flow there, right? But the weeds were already there. They didn't just show up afterwards. They were there. So you have weeds essentially here. You've got worries, that's weeds. You've got, this deceit of if I seek after these things, it'll make me happy. I mean, why else do people seek for riches? Because they think with the riches, they could buy happiness. Riches will make me happy. I'll be able to buy the things I want and then I'll be happy. Really, that's one of the things, if you're a personal trainer, you're a personal developer, like the life training things, you try to help people to understand what is the underlying true motivation. Nobody wants money because they want money. They want money because they want something that they think money will give them: power, fame, stuff, security, joy, love, whatever. They think it will give them something. They don't want the money just for money. They think the money will get them something. That's the deceit of what the riches will get you. If that's what your weeds are all, now pay attention, because some of you think, well, Rabbi taught this before. I've never taught this before. It's the first time I'm teaching, so pay attention. It's the weeds of the deceit of riches, it's the weeds of the worry that do not allow space for you to have the word be sown and take root. It can't. You have to clear all that other stuff out. There's no room for what he's trying to give you. There is no room in Yah's. We're told to take the mind of Yeshua, Philippians 2:5, and let that mind be in you. There's no room in that mind for worry. There's no room for that mind for deceit of what will get you the things that you think you want in life. All of that comes from above. We don't worry. Why? Yeshua told us that in Matthew chapter 6, and we read that whole thing about do not worry about this, that, and the other thing, right? Because your Father knows you need all these things. So that's a weed that needs to come out. There is no thought of that in Yeshua's mind. His mind has no thought of worrying about the things of the flesh and the world and what you may think you need. He has total confidence. Whatever he needs, the Father will provide. So there's no room for that in your mind either, if you're going to let his mind be your mind. Same thing with the deceit of riches. He said, and we didn't really go back far enough in chapter 6, but he says, I think we quoted it very barely, but lay up for yourself treasures in heaven. Don't worry about the treasures of this world. That's the deceit. See, now we're in Matthew 13, the same book of Matthew Yeshua said earlier in chapter 6, right? That flows through to Matthew 13. He said, do not lay up for yourself, verse 19 of chapter 6, treasures on earth. In other words, don't make the effort to seek after the deceit of riches. Don't lay up for yourself treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break and steal, but lay up for yourself treasures in heaven where neither the moth or rust destroys, where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart shall be. There's no room to, we have many verses. If you listen to the heart of the matter, many of you have. I know it's 64, teachings, but still. If you listen to the heart of the matter, how many times did we talk about in that teaching that you were to lay up these words in your heart? Those are verses we read, right? We quoted that Yahweh tells you to lay up these words in your heart. Well, if your heart, though, is on, he says, where your treasure is where your heart is. Well, if the treasure is the deceit of riches, where is the heart? There's no room to lay up his stuff in your heart. Your heart's already focused and full of things. Those emotional attachments. And so then we end up with this worry thing. This is where I say, peace in a world not his is the name of the teaching. Well, you're not going to have peace in this world that's not his if you're going to focus on things the way the world that's not his focuses. They focus on this riches that is actually a deception. And you allow yourself to be susceptible to that deceit and to that deception. You fall into that trap. And so you also worry. He says, and the worry of this age. What's the worry of this age? All the stuff going on in the world that everybody else is worried about. You want people to talk to you about your belief? How about showing that you're not worried when everybody else is and them going to you, why aren't you worried? And you say, because I have the peace that was given to me by Messiah. What is that? Something he just gave it to you? No. He says, I do not give it to you as the world would give. How would the world give it to you? It'd be like if I said, I'm going to hand you this Bible. Say, I'm going to give you a Bible, and I go and I hand it to you. That's how the world would do it. They would literally physically hand it to you. He says, I don't give you peace that way. I'm going to have you go through a life where you learn to trust me. You learn to have my mind. You learn to see that the fruit of obedience and covenanting brings peace. Then you shall have received, because you'll understand where the source is, how it comes, what brings peace. Oh no, we want it just given to us. So when somebody says to you, well, why aren't you worried? He says, because I have peace. Why do you have, what kind of peace? Well, my Messiah told me, my peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. Oh, how do I get that? By walking this out, by trusting him, by coming into covenant. And then you receive, as a fruit of all that, the peace that goes beyond understanding. That's how it works. Continuing here in chapter 13 of Matthew, and he says, again, we'll read verse 22. That sown among the thorns is he who hears the word and the worry of this age. So all the things that would worry everybody else shouldn't worry you, but it worries the people here in verse 22. And the deceit of riches choke the word, and it becomes fruitless. Now that sown on the good soil is he who hears the word and understands it, who indeed bears fruit and yields. Now, bear in mind, he didn't say it in verse 23, but it's hinted. If they are understanding it and bearing fruit with it, then they're not having the problem of it being without root, right? They're not having the problem of it being choked out. So this is the way I was just explained it in my own words. I said, so they're going to bear fruit, and the fruit is going to yield what? Peace. He says, and what it's going to yield also is 100-fold, 60, and 30. What if that's also referring to things like peace? He says, those who understand it and bear fruit, it's going to yield you 100-fold, 60-fold, even 30-fold peace. The name it, claim it guys want you to think that that's stuff. You're going to do these things, and he's going to give you 100-fold, 60-fold, and 30-fold money, abundance, wealth. What if he was talking about peace? Because, if you go back to chapter 6, he's talking about treasures in heaven, not treasures down here. So why all of a sudden you think he's changing his mind about what he's talking about? That he's now talking about treasures down here? He said, but you're going to have those things that you're laying up in heaven 100-fold, 60-fold, 30-fold. And down here, you'll have peace. You won't have that worry. You won't have the deception that you're susceptible to in verse 22. He said, because you're going to understand it. Now notice that he said, you're going to understand it, and indeed it bears fruit. In other words, there's a word that's missing there, a little phrase. You're going to understand it, and you're going to do it, and indeed it's going to bear fruit. Because understanding it doesn't bear any fruit. Understanding it and doing it bears fruit. Which is why some of you are trapped, frozen in study mode. Oh, you're understanding stuff and learning and understanding stuff, and you want to share with everybody what you understand, but are you doing it? Because really, you don't understand it till you do it. I've told you that over and over again. You should know this from your own life experience. If I took you before you actually kept Shabbat and tried to explain to you what Shabbat really feels like and does and everything else, you would never understand what I'm talking about. You cannot explain what it feels like to take this day and focus it the way we do on Him. How do you explain what that feels like to you? The peace it gives you, the things that it does for you internally and with your relationships vertically and horizontally. You can't explain that. You can put words. I'm not saying you can't put words to it, but the other person will still not get it. You can't get it unless you do it. You just can't. You could come back from your first time keeping the feasts, whichever feast it is, you go and you keep the feast and try to explain it to all the people who didn't go. Let's say you go to a congregation and you were one of the only ones that went to keep the feast with the bigger group, and then you come back and try to explain it, and they can't receive what you're telling them. They can't imagine it was that good as you're making it sound. How could it be that good? Well, they weren't there. You were there. You know what it felt like. So you can't really transfer that information. So verse 23 is saying, look, if you are good soil, you will hear the word. And actually, if you know what, why don't we just change that to Shema? Then we're not missing anything. He says, you will Shema the word. That means you're going to hear it and do it and understand it. And actually, if you put it in that order, I like that order a lot. Because some of you want to understand it and then do it. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't understand how, where, when, okay? Those kind of things. What to do. It's the why that all of you struggle with before you want to do anything. The only why you need is because He said so, like any good parent. Yahweh was the first one to say, you need to do this because I said so. Because I'm the Father. This is the key. So he says, and those who Shema the word, they hear it and they do it and understand it, which is going to help bring the roots in. See, once you understand the why, the roots really start to go down. And you're not going to understand the why until you do it. The understanding comes with the doing. You got to do it, then you'll understand it. He says, those people indeed bear fruit, and they yield some 100, some 60, some 30. Now, what fruit are we talking about here? Well, the churches want to tell you it has to do with wealth. I think it has to do with love, joy, peace, patience. You're going to yield the fruit. The 9 aspects of the Ruach. Maybe that's what it's talking about here. How about if that was increased 100-fold or 60-fold or 30-fold in your life? How much difference would that make? More than if I just gave you 100-fold more money. If I gave you 100-fold more money, you would just have all the same problems in a different tax bracket. You'd have a nicer car to drive to your problems in. That's it. It wouldn't change the internal issues. If you are a depressed person, how many wealthy people, especially famous people, end up putting a shotgun in their mouth and killing themselves or drug overdosing and everything else? It didn't make them happy to be famous and rich. You are still going to be you, just with a lot more money. And if know what money does and wealth does? It simply takes whatever you have and brings it out in bigger abundance. So if you already had problems, they're bigger. If you already were good, then it's bigger. You have a chance to do more good or do more harm or do more personal stuff. It's just going to give you more ability to, it's almost like a way to, like a magnifier for whatever's already there. So if you haven't fixed the inside stuff, the abundance financially isn't going to make your life any better, probably make it worse. Because it's a magnifier. It gives you more ability to do more of whatever it is that's already inside of you. Oh, it's going to change my life. And I'm not unless you change your life. The money doesn't change your life. It just changes your zip code. It doesn't do anything else, maybe. If you move or something, it's not going to change your life. You're still going to be you. So I'm thinking that the sum 100-fold, 60 and 30, the bearing the fruit, it's the fruit of doing what? Doing the word. So what is the fruit of doing the word? Wealth and abundance coming out of your ears, money and stuff? No. Peace, patience, love, joy, all that stuff, that's the fruit. No more fears, no more worries, no more tears and concern. You have full emunah and trust in the Father being fully in charge and that everything's going to be okay. I could give you a ton of money. It's not going to, you know what, all the rich people right now are not necessarily sure if they're over 70 or 80 years old and they've got a ton of money, they're not necessarily not afraid of this coronavirus killing them. Their money is not going to protect them at all. Do you know, Rebbitzin had seen pictures recently from right here in Chattanooga. Some of the wealthiest neighborhoods got destroyed by the tornado that came through. The money didn't help them, did it? Their house still got destroyed, just like the person in the trailer park. The trailer park house, the rich mansion, just as destroyed, and everything in between. The money did not protect their house. It still got wiped out. If they were in it, they still got killed, whether they were in a rich house or a poor house. The money didn't make any difference. But when these things come and happen, if you have the Shema that you're doing with the word, you have peace. You're not afraid of tornadoes. You're not afraid of the world events. You're not afraid of the coronavirus. You're not afraid of pandemics or earthquakes. You're not afraid. Now, it doesn't mean that you act foolishly as if, okay, callously disregard because I'm not afraid, but you just don't have the fear, the worry. We had a lot of phone calls at the beginning of this whole pandemic thing from people that were absolutely panicking. And I'm not picking on you if you did. We're still in one of these types of dirt here. We're dealing with these types of ground in ourselves. And we're seeking to grow into, okay, so how do you take bad dirt? Let's start from the beginning. So we have the first kind is the kind by the wayside. Okay? So the parable of the sower, when anyone hears the word of the rain, etc. Okay, this is what's sown by the wayside. So that stuff that's not even sown, it's kind of like you take it, you keep it in a box nearby, but you don't actually bring it into you. It's sort of sown by the wayside. Or it's like it's sown on the road. It's not even meant to be like where things grow. So you're not even like ground that's even tilled. This is ground that's just, it's the wayside. So what do you need to do first? Well, we need to start tearing up the ground, making it able to receive. And then the next thing is the rocky places. Well, then we got to get those boulders out of there and all those rocks out of there. And then we start getting to the vines and the thorns and get all of that out of there and the weeds. And now you got some good soil. You know, during this sort of lockdown that we're on, you got a lot of good time available to you to start. You know, a lot of you are doing this in the physical world, right? You're out there in your yard and you're tearing up your yard and you're putting gardens in or you're putting your lawn in and you're doing all this stuff physically in the flesh, so to speak. All right, so when you're done and you're hot, you're sweaty and everything else, go in the house, take your shower, get all cleaned up, and then sit down and do the same thing internally. Till up the ground. And by the way, what else makes ground good? You might need to put fertilizer, and you might need to put other minerals and things into that ground if it's deficient in it. In other words, you need to feed the ground. Okay, you need to feed the ground. Because what does the fertilizer really do? It's bringing the nutrients and the minerals into the ground. So let's just not make that graphic metaphor in some way, but make it it's about feeding the ground. So make sure that you're feeding the ground. So how do you do that? You listen to teachings, you read the Word, you meditate and pray on the Word, right? So you nurture that ground. So part of it is actively getting stuff out of the dirt that doesn't belong there, and part of it is putting stuff into the dirt that does belong there, and then patiently, look, when you make your garden, does the stuff grow the next day that you just planted? No. It takes time to grow roots and to get kind of going, and you got to water that ground with the water of the Word in the internal ground, right? You got to water the ground. You got to keep making sure that the weeds aren't popping back up. By the way, when you take the weeds out, does that mean you never have to check for weeds ever again? That stuff pops back pretty easy, doesn't it? You got to stay on top of it. How do we have peace in this world? You need to turn up your awareness level of all the things that steal the peace, and your awareness level of all the things that bring the peace. He's telling you right here, this parable of the sower. It's not a lot of verses. Go and read it over and over again and ask yourself, okay, just like I talked about with the Omer accounting, like we're going to look at, say, these things on a 49-day basis, and we're going to say, what about this applies to me? Those of you who are watching this teaching may not know what I'm talking about. It doesn't matter, okay? But you're going to be looking at something, an aspect of the Word, and say, does it apply to me, or how does it apply to me, and am I applying it? So here you're looking at the parable of the sower. We could have added this to the 49 days and said, okay, let's look at the different types of ground and say, okay, am I doing anything that's like wayside ground? Is there anything that I need to do to tear that up and make it more ready to be good ground? What about rocky ground? Do I have rocks that need to be torn out of there and need to be dealt with, etc.? What about weeds and thorns? Do I have a problem with that going on here? Is it choking out the Word? What's going on with my dirt? Or am I just going to sit there going, well, I'm good dirt. I'm great soil, man. I'll just, receive it. I'm looking at that 100-fold right now. I mean, you guys can do the 30. I'm looking at the 100. This is foolish thinking. You're going to yield whatever you're going to yield. Make the effort and you have a shot at the 100, but what you got to do is you got to do the doing. It's two aspects. It's just like the Torah. Torah has what? Two aspects. Do not and do. That which you do not do and that which you are to do. The same thing here. Stuff that needs to be gotten rid of and stuff that needs to be put in. Take stuff out and put stuff in. So you have to get out all of the wrong thinking, all of the wrong emotions, all of the wrong understandings so that there's room. Some of you focus so much on the latest whatever, whether it's the shape of the earth or the calendar or whatever. You get something you obsess on, or the coronavirus. When this came out, some of you watch 87 hours a day of coronavirus stuff and you're not doing anything else. Are you leaving room for the Word? Now bear in mind, I do pay attention, okay, to what's going on with the coronavirus. But you know when I do it? I do it when I sit down to eat, so I have time to do it. I don't do it when I'm doing my other stuff. I want to make sure that I'm not crowding out time for the other things. I want to make sure I'm aware. Maybe something's happened. Maybe the laws have changed. Maybe all of a sudden lockdown is, before we got the lockdown, I had to pay attention to find out when we were going to go on the lockdown. Would we be able to broadcast from here? Would they shut that down? So yes, I had an awareness. But some of you are putting it into a 24/7 awareness, and you're in that because you're emotionally still in that fear place, that worry place. And so you're just constantly stirring that up. But I think this is an incredibly important parable for us to be focused on with the worry. Now, I know it does talk about just the word worry there in verse 22, but it's just one aspect of understanding that this is of the world, right? I said peace in a world not his. The world that's not his focuses on this deceit to bring happiness and joy, the riches. The world that we live in, is all kinds of full of pressures and persecution. People will persecute and pressure you about anything. It doesn't even just have to be about religion. If you try to do anything that steps out and away from the crowd, if the crowd is financially poor and you're trying to get more wealth, they will pick on you. If you're at your job and you try to elevate up the chain and other people are not willing to do that or know they'll never get there, they will pick on you. Anything that you do to try to elevate yourself in any way, you start doing life coaching and try to improve your life in any way, people will persecute and attack you. The crowd doesn't like when you step out from them. Whatever aspect of your life. If you start trying to be healthier and everybody around you, is not very healthy, you try to eat better, you try to exercise, whatever it is that you're trying to do different than the group that you normally hang out with, the world will call it. Some of you think, well, I don't hang out with the world. Well, you do. You spend enough time with people in the world. And you have those influences from the world. You start to step out from that, they will persecute you. It's not just about Torah observance. It can be any aspect of your life that you decide to do differently. And they will mock you, they'll tease you, they'll ridicule you, they'll do something to give you pressure. So realize how that all plays out. So this is the world that you are in, but not of. And there's no peace in that. If you become of, you don't have the peace. That's one of the measures of whether or not you're of the world. If the world is all freaked out and you're freaked out too, well, now you're of the world. You're doing what they're doing. You're supposed to not be of, just in. But if you act like they act and feel like they feel and think like they think, you're also of, not just in. Remember, Yeshua prayed that we would not be of. He didn't say that because he prayed we wouldn't be. He just prayed that we wouldn't be. That we would make the effort to identify and understand what would make the difference between being of or not of the world. In the world, you will have challenges. He says that in the world there's challenges and struggles and all this other stuff, but you are not. You need to have peace in that world. You're here as a journeyer. You're journeying through the world. But you should almost think of it from like back in the days remember when Teflon came out, it was all a big deal how nothing stuck to Teflon. And then you'd have politicians that they said they were like Teflon because these charges would go and nothing would stick, or different people we had that one mobster guy, they called him the Teflon Don because they had all these charges, nothing stick to him. They finally got him, but okay. But the idea that nothing would stick, that's what you need to be. If you're not of the world, it's like having a Teflon shield. It's called Torah. Nothing that the world throws at you will stick. You don't get any world on you. You don't need to go and get your, let me pull it out here. You don't need to get like your sanitizer from worldly stuff and every day try to, nothing will stick to you. I'm not saying that about the coronavirus. If you're touching things, you should use something like this. But I'm talking about when it comes to the spiritual matters. You can journey in a world and walk through it without any of it clinging to you or sticking to you. That is most important in terms of behaviors, emotions, mindsets, thinking patterns. You journey in the world and you will pick up, if you're not careful, if your Teflon isn't strong. How do you get a good, strong Teflon armor? Well, go to Ephesians 6, look at the armor of Elohim, right? But how do you get that good armor? You're in the Word as good ground, putting on all these things, nurturing the roots, pulling out all of the weeds and everything else that needs to come out of there so that there's nothing to grow in your garden. Nothing will stick to you. It doesn't have any way to go. That's what you need to have, is that protection. Then you can journey in the world and have no issues. That doesn't mean they won't persecute you, but you have no issues. Doesn't mean there won't be pressures, but it's okay. Because now you have what I always call mind over matter. You don't mind, so it doesn't matter. Because you have the mind of Yeshua. And the mind of Yeshua doesn't involve itself in that stuff. So that mind makes that stuff not matter. If you have his mind, let me rephrase it now. If you have his mind, it doesn't matter. That's going to be my new mind over matter. Manny, you can make something for that one. Okay? Scriptural, spiritual mind over matter. If you have his mind, then the matters of the world don't matter. Okay, if you have his mind, then the world's matters don't matter. That's your spiritual mind over matter. If you have his mind, then the world's concerns don't matter. You need not be concerned about it. I don't know the right way. I just worded it 14 different ways. Man, it's like, could you just pick one? Please just pick one so I can quote you right. I'm trying to figure out how to make it as short a phrase as possible. Okay, maybe I'll try this. If you have his mind, the worries of the world don't matter. Okay, that'll make it simple. And we'll call that spiritual mind over matter. If you have his mind, and you can even put a little quote to Philippians 2:5, a little reference. Let this mind be in you. Okay? That's your spiritual mind over matter. Because He walked through the world, and nothing they did really mattered. He allowed things to happen. Things were supposed to happen. Nothing anybody did stopped what he was doing, interfered with what he was doing. He accomplished everything. He, at the dying moment on the stake, said, I have completed what I was sent here to do. Nothing stopped it. I got everything done. Can you say the same thing in your life? Nothing stopped it. I got everything done. I was brought into this world you were brought into this world to accomplish certain things. You were, all of us. You were brought into the world to accomplish things. Can you confidently feel at any moment, in case you don't know when your life's going to be over, to be able to say, I have accomplished what you gave me to do? So what has he given all of us to do? All of us have the same responsibility, and then we all have certain things that others don't have. We have our own individual things, but we all have one thing in common. Our responsibility is to shema the word and bear the fruit. All of us have that one. Now, some of us have other responsibilities. Some of us have responsibilities as parents. Some of us have as husbands or wives. Some of us have responsibilities in our careers and other things for other people and stuff. But your one thing that we all have in common is to shema the word and bear fruit. It's a covenant. And so, can you say, I've done that. I am doing it. I'm continuing to do it. So that the end, whenever that any moment comes, you're okay. That's very important. I can't emphasize these things enough for people. Okay, let's go to Philippians 4. Okay, we're going to read a couple of verses here. Philippians 4. We'll begin in verse 4. Rejoice in Yahweh always. Again, I say rejoice. Now, bear in mind that he's talking to people that are living in the world. They're not of the world, but they live in the world. And so, because after all, the world doesn't always have joy. And he's telling people to rejoice. Let your gentleness be known to all men. The master is near. So we need to be gentle. I know I'm guilty of this all the time. You can come across not gentle. What is one of the aspects of the fruit? Gentleness. So we got to bear that fruit. Let your gentleness be known. So how do you do that? It's by your actions. You're not walking around telling everybody, by the way, I'm gentle. Did you see that over here where I was being gentle? No, just be known because you're gentle. Okay? Do not worry at all. See, Paul was paying attention. He understood Messiah's message. Do not worry at all. We can just put a period there and end it right there. Don't worry. Stop worrying. Don't worry. Be happy, y'all. All of a sudden, I'm going to start breaking into Bobby McFerrin. It took me a second to make sure I could get his name right in my head. Okay? Do you know I actually went to a sermon once at Sukkot where at the end of it, and they played that song? And that's, believe me, the church that we were going to, Worldwide Church of God, we were all shocked that they did this at a service, at a Holy Day service. But they closed the service, the message, the sermon with that song. Don't worry, be happy. He says, don't worry at all, but in every matter, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, let your request be made known to Elohim. So he's giving us a process, okay? So first he says, don't worry at all. Just flat out an instruction, don't worry. But in every matter, by prayer and petition. So when you pray, and what is petition? It means that you're asking for something. Petition is usually a word when you're going before an authority to ask for something. So you're going before the Father and you're asking for things. He says, make sure you're doing it with thanksgiving. The model prayer, all the other things that we do. Start off by saying, thank you. Start off with the Dayenu. I appreciate what you've done for me up to this point, and if you do nothing else for me, that's fine. That would have been enough. However, if you might consider some things, I would petition you for these things. So you approach him with thanksgiving. Let your request be made known to Elohim with thanksgiving. Because some of you are in panic mode and you're just screaming out to Yah and you forget that he's done so much. And you will calm down quite a bit if you would pause for a second to figure out how to thank him before you just go before him screaming for your needs. Try to thank him. He says, if you can do these things, the peace of Elohim, which surpasses all understanding, shall guard your hearts and minds through Messiah Yeshua. So he's telling you, this is sort of our process. Okay, you don't worry, because after all, if you start off with worrying, you're not going to get verse 7, the peace. Worried people don't have peace. They're complete opposites. There's no way to have peace and worry at the same time. He says, don't worry. Go before the Father if you have a situation. Go with thanksgiving. He says, let your request be known, but then the peace of Elohim, which suppresses all understanding, shall guard your hearts and your minds. So notice what he's saying here, though. He didn't say, don't worry, petition the Father, and he'll give you whatever you ask for. He says, and he will give you the peace about the situation, whether he gives you what you ask for or not. He's going to give you the peace, and that peace is going to guard the problem, the center of all your problems, your emotional center, the heart, and your mind. Because it's our wrong thoughts and attaching to those wrong thoughts, emotions, that gets us in all the trouble. He says, if you're worried, none of this is going to work. Here's the formula. First and foremost, stop worrying. Why should you stop worrying? Because you recognize that you have emunah, so worrying doesn't fit into that model. He has everything under control, so therefore my worrying is dumb. I'm not trying to pick on you if you worry. I'm just trying to say that's a thought you should have. It is foolishness to worry if you also believe he has everything under control. Those two thoughts cannot, stay in the same, you can't occupy the same space with those thoughts. If he's got everything under control, what are you worried about? Okay, you're doing something, and a person comes over to you because they think something's about to go wrong, and you say, it's okay, I've got it. If they have emunah, so to speak, with you, saying where they trust that if you say you have it, then they'll have peace. But if they keep going, no, because they're not trusting you. And they're going to try to drive from the back seat, so to speak. Not necessarily just when you're in a car, but they're going to try to give you guidance and instruction after you said, I got it. Don't worry, I've got it under control. Yahweh tells us, without any exception, that he has everything, always. Everything, always under control. Why couldn't you have peace? The only reason you don't have peace is because you don't believe that all the time. There are moments where you forget that that's true. There are moments where you forget that that's true. Always, without exception, he has everything under control. That's emunah. That you would believe that. And so he says here, look, don't worry at all, but you can go before the Father, you can pray and petition, because he desires that you do that, but do it with thanksgiving. Part of thanksgiving is, Father, I thank you that I can come before you, and I also thank you that in doing so, I've done my part, and now I don't need to worry about it. I've brought it to you. Think about the words of Mordechai, very powerful words. When he said to Esther, if you don't do this thing, I'm not worried about it, but you'll have missed your opportunity, because Yahweh will grab somebody else and it still will happen. Somebody will still come and intervene and do what needs to be done, and we will be delivered. But you, Esther, you were put in this place for such a time as this so that you could be the one doing this. But Mordechai had the emunah to say, and if you don't, that's going to cost you the opportunity of being the instrument. But he will raise up somebody else. It will happen. We will be done. He's not going to let his people just all get slaughtered and be done. He had emunah. Okay? So if we do these things, he says, then the peace of Elohim. Yeshua said, peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. John 14:27 says, the peace of Elohim, which surpasses understanding. In other words, it makes no sense to the world, to your flesh, how that peace should be there with this circumstances going on. the peace is beyond the ability to understand how you can have peace when all of this stuff is happening. He says, how do you have peace when you're Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they're throwing you in the fire? How can you have peace when you're Daniel and they're throwing you into the lion's den? How can you have peace standing by the sea with Pharaoh behind you and the rocks and the cliffs and there's no place to go but the water? You don't have peace because you in your flesh, you can't see the solution. You can't see why this plays out in his plan somehow. And so you have this perceived threat, this perceived adverse consequence. That's where the worry comes from. He says, why are you worried? I've got this all in control. You shema, you covenant, you hear, you do, and you trust. That's really your life. Your whole life, to hear, to get the guidance and instruction to make sure you understand what you heard, to do it, and then to trust that that's all you need to do. Life is not really complicated. Our problem is that we don't get immediate results. We don't get the fruit we're looking for, that result we're looking for immediately. But our life is very simple, and the Torah is very simple. He says, my covenant with you doesn't require 400 pages, like sometimes a law being passed, a bill in Congress. It's very simple. If you will obey my voice. Now, bear in mind that the obeying the voice implies a huge amount of trust. It's that emunah that's required. If you will obey my voice, in other words, trusting that what I say will give you and bring you what you want ultimately. What do we want ultimately? To be happy, to have peace. It's really the two main things. I want to be happy and I want to have peace. If you are dejected, rejected, if you are depressed, if you are worried, fearful, anxiety, panic, stress, there's no peace there and you're not happy. But you want to be happy. He promises you will be happy. Maybe not now, maybe not next year, but you'll be happy. By the way, if you really wanted to understand this, you can be happy right now. It's a choice. James confuses us all when he says, count it all joy when you're in trials. What? That's not my sort of choice of thoughts when I'm in a trial. Hey, yay, I'm in a trial. And you could choose to be. You could choose to be joyful. Excuse me. Knowing that going through it will bear fruit. Peaceable fruit, really. So he says, and the peace of Elohim, which surpasses understanding, that peace, if you did the first processes, will then guard your heart and your mind. So from the rejoicing, from the petitioning, from the Shema and everything else that we're talking about, that's how you receive when Yeshua says, my peace I give to you. It's not as the world would give it. The world's going to give you peace by treaties and by, whatever. He's going to give you peace through your life, through learning to trust him, to trust the Father, to trust the Son, to trust the process, the protocol, the program, whatever word you want to call it. They have given you the system that works. I speak, you listen. That's what he says. If you do what I say, all things that you could ever want in your greatest, wildest dreams will be made manifest for you. Now, by the way, we can't accept that as a promise to us now because that was for corporate Israel in the land. And it is going to come again when he returns and restores all that. But we're hoping and trusting and being a part of that in the future. That's where we are in all of this. We're believing that if we do this now, we will be there then. They were told, if you do this now, you'll have it now. Go walk into the land, do what I've told you to do, and you will be fine. Deuteronomy 28 tells them all the blessings that they will have. Nobody to make them afraid and all these other things. But then again, we also have prophets that are telling us in the prophecies that there will be the time of the restoration when everybody will come up to the mountain and they'll, it says come, to Jerusalem, and they'll go up to Jerusalem, and they'll seek his ways and they'll learn the Torah, and that is going to be a time when nobody will make you afraid. They'll beat the swords and the plowshares and the whole thing, right? This is important, that we know that this is about us preparing now so that we will be in the then when this all happens. We're no longer, because of the, and don't get mad at them, because of the mess-ups of our forefathers, we don't have the option of do it now and you receive it now. We're receiving the punishment of all that. And you know what? That's okay. You have to have peace with that. Don't get all mad at them. Some of you struggle and say, well, why did he wait till I was 73 to call me? Why did he wait till I was 52 to call me? Why did he wait? Because it's his choice. He had reasons. He doesn't have to explain himself to you. But you have to trust it. You have to trust him. And when you don't, you worry. When you don't have peace. When you don't, you have all kinds of other issues because you're allowing all of that bad ground stuff to happen. Rocks are coming in and weeds and thorns and all that stuff is coming into your garden. You're in the world, but you're not of the world. And that's really the key here as we're going through this. So he says, peace of Elohim that surpasses, easy for me to say, and the peace of Elohim which surpasses all understanding shall guard your hearts and minds through Yeshua Messiah. So he says it's going to do it through Yeshua Messiah. So in your Christian mind, you're thinking Messiah is just going to do all this stuff magically for you. Now in your Messianic Torah observant mind, you realize Yeshua is the way, the truth, and the life. He's the walking Torah. So he's referring to that your guarding of your minds through Yeshua is talking about the Torah, talking about the Word. When combined with the Ruach, which is the truth, the Spirit of truth, that is also Yeshua reminding you through that means by which that's now in you to help guard your mind and your heart. But it all comes through what you had to put in there. So he links that to Yeshua. For the rest, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is righteous, whatever is clean, whatever is lovely, whatever is of a good report, if there is any uprightness and if there is any praise, think on these. Oh no, I want to send all my friends all the latest things that are going to scare the you-know-what out of them and panic them that the world is coming down around their ears next week. He says, no. I want you to focus on the noble, righteous, clean, lovely, good report, upright, praise, etc. And what you have learned, verse 9, and received and heard and saw in me. So now this is a discipleship language. He says, what you have learned, received, and heard and saw in me, practice these, and the Elohim of peace shall be with you. In other words, he's saying, I have demonstrated in front of your eyes what this looks like. That should be all of our goals. All of us should have that goal of being able to walk this out so that people will see it by observing it in you. And so, what kind of stuff are you posting on Facebook? Do you sound panicked, worried, or do you sound joyful and okay? I'm not talking like showing a callous disregard for the fact that the world is falling apart around our ears. And it is at times doing that. But can you have peace during that? Or are you going to go into the world's mindset, the world's heart, and freak out? Okay? He says, and what you have learned and received and heard and saw in me, practice these, and the Elohim of peace shall be with you. It is my goal and my hope that I can say those words at some point and feel confident that that was it. Now, I know I don't always present the best witness because I have, as Moses and others have had in time, anger issues and things, and I can't have issues where I don't have the gentleness that he talks about. And then we need to embrace that gentleness. And the other aspects of the fruit, being kind and gentle. Although I have to tell you, sometimes you need the kick in the you-know-what. And there's a place for that too. But it has to be done in a loving way. It has to be done in a way that doesn't show that you're just angry at the person. Okay? I mean, Yahweh had to give people the boot pretty good a few times. And we're out here in the dispersion because of that. And this is really important that we understand it. I think we'll end here, which is early, because I don't want to go to start the next thing which is going to actually be too many verses. So we'll save that for next time. So I'll give you a little bit of a break here on a holy day, although we are going to open for the afterburn questions, so who knows what that'll take. That might take a little bit. But I'm hoping that we're getting this, okay? This worry thing needs to go. It's incredibly counterproductive to everything you're trying to do. It is the adversary. So, you were raised to fear the devil. You were raised to be afraid of this red, horn-tailed, whatever the Christian church has all got you afraid of. You want to be afraid of something? Be afraid of worry. Worry is going to destroy and undermine everything. It is an adversary. Okay, we call Hasatan the adversary. Worry is the adversary to what you're doing. In the kingdom, the key is emunah. All right, you must have that full faith, belief, trust that everything is under control. Everything is going to be fine, even though it may. Look, he tells us everything is going to get to the point where if he doesn't intervene, the whole world would basically be nobody left alive. And he also tells us that's okay. In other words, it will be okay. That is going to happen, but I am going to intervene before everybody's dead, and ultimately it's going to play out and everything will be okay. So he already tells you it will go to a place none of us can even imagine yet. It's going to get to a place the world has never seen, and yet somehow that's going to be okay. It's going to ultimately be okay. It won't be okay that people are suffering and dying and everything, but it will ultimately come and bear the fruit that he wants it to bear. And you have to believe that. Well, actually, you don't have to believe that, but if you want to be covenanted and everything else, you have to believe that. That's the covenant. And the question is, do you believe it or not? Because a thing like this little pandemic virus has got everybody flipped out. This is not the tribulation. This is not a plague. It's a virus. If it were a plague, it would have a 100-fold mortality rate problem compared to where it is now. Okay, everybody would be dying. Then it would be more like a plague. The plagues of Egypt affected everybody in a much worse way than that. This is not a plague. It is a pandemic, it is a virus. But if this is making you worry, what about when things really go bad? What are you going to do? You're going to have, what I hope you're going to do is have emunah. Amen? Amen. Father, we come before you, and we want to really appreciate so much and thank you for sharing with us the written word that came from you and through the living word, Yeshua, was inspired into the writers of the book, so that we would be able to understand how we can have this peace that he gives us and not as the world gives. That we can have the peace that goes and surpasses beyond understanding. That we can understand how to become good ground and bear good fruit, so that we can develop true emunah, that we could develop true faith and belief and trust that everything, without exception, serves your purpose either because you cause it or allow it to be. And so, Father, we want to thank you. We want to praise you. We want to ask that you would help us to truly embrace, understand, and let take root these things from your word so that we can apply them in our lives and just grow that much more as we transform into the image of Yeshua. So, Father, we thank you, praise you, and give you all glory and honor as we come before you. In the name above all names, Yeshua our Messiah. Amen. Amen. Amen.